where you asked, do we go after Tyreek Hill, Garrett Wilson, or Davante Adams? Obviously, we're referencing the Steelers' plan for 2025. How do we upgrade this receiver room? Because, man, we could use it. We were looking to upgrade this receiver room all offseason and even throughout the duration of this season. As you saw, we made a trade at the trade deadline for a Mike Williams. And it still hasn't really gotten our receiving core to the level that we would like, which is why you asked the question, do we go after a Tyreek Hill? Do we go after a Garrett Wilson or a Davante Adams this offseason? And with you bringing up these three names, you're asking, which one would I pick of the three? So I'll do a pros and cons for each one. Tyreek Hill, 1,000 yards every year would be a definite pro. Consistent year in, year out. As long as he stays healthy, he's getting at least 1,000 yards. Although this year he technically didn't hit it. He was in the 900s, but you get my point. And his ceiling is being the best or one of the best receivers in the league. His floor is at least 1,000 yards. His ceiling is being one of the best receivers and getting like a 1,700-yard season. They call him the Cheetah because he's fast as hell. Easily one of the fastest receivers of all time. Still may be the fastest receiver. I bet you he will say he's still the fastest receiver in the league, but he's getting up there in age. He's 30. He'll be 31 next year. But that speed is something you can't teach. That's a special skill set. That is a rare thing. That's why dudes like Xavier Worthy, even though his route running isn't completely on point coming out of Texas, is getting drafted in the first round by the Chiefs. Because speed, you can't teach speed. Dude's running, what do you run, like a 4.19 or a 4.2 something at the combine. That's why the Chiefs are going to draft an Xavier Worthy. They'll figure out the route running. They'll figure out all that other stuff later, but you can't teach speed. And Tyreek Hill has speed. And even right now, like, I just went through the whole ceiling floor thing. He's still one of the best receivers in the league, hands down. Even coming off of a down year, I guess you could say, he still had 900 yards, and that was with Huntley being in there and them going through a bunch of different backup quarterbacks when Tua was hurt. So, like, I bet you if Tua was healthy the whole year, and you guys know I'm not a Tua fan, I don't think he's any good, but Tyreek Hill probably would have had at least 1,300 yards. The cons, as I mentioned, he's getting up there in age a little bit, 30, 31. So he's starting to phase out of his prime. I'd still say he's in his prime, but he's on the back half of his prime for sure. Has a bit of an injury history and has a smaller frame. So if you're looking for a bona fide outside guy to complement with Pickens, maybe Tyreek isn't the guy you're looking for, even though he plays bigger than what his size is. For sure. You could throw him some balls one-on-one, and he'll jump up almost like AB, almost like a Steve Smith. He'll jump up and get it. But if you're throwing passes to him across the middle of the field, that really isn't his forte, because I've seen him get a little bit scared. He starts seeing some ghosts there and drops the ball and is looking out for his body as opposed to trying to catch the ball, and the ball will hit the turf, and that's that. May stop a drive, may stall out the offense a little bit. But, I mean, he's still, again, one of the best receivers in the league right now. Another con is, I would say, how he acted in this last Miami game. Like, if you're the Steelers and you're talking about wanting to start getting away from diva receivers and having locker room problems with your receivers, which has been a consistent theme over the years here in Pittsburgh. I mean, you think go to AB, Claypool, Juju, Deontay. Now we got some stuff with Pickens. If you're trying to get away from that, like what Tyreek is, with what Tyreek did in this last Miami game, like that's not something you're looking forward to if you bring him in. Like that's you're not trying to trade for that. You're trying to trade for the player, the production, but not any of that extra stuff. We already have dealt with all that extra stuff with receivers. If we're going outside, we're trying to bring a receiver that will clean some of that stuff up, or at least not give you any of that. So what he did was apparently not go into the game. Like McDaniel was calling for Tyreek Hill to get into the game. He didn't go in, a la Deontay Johnson and what he did with the Ravens this year. And then you heard him after the game make it clear that he was trying to get out of Miami. Now, apparently McDaniel and Tyreek Hill has met up since then, and they talked it over, smoothed things over. But I don't believe it. I don't. I think Tyreek Hill has played his last game in Miami. You heard the emotion. You heard where he was coming from in that post-game interview. He's done with it. Absolutely done with it. And then the last thing with him in terms of a negative would be his contract. It's a big contract. It's not like it's what Justin Jefferson got, like $35 million. It's $30 million. Like he signed it a couple years ago. So he's not getting paid top dollar. It's still one of the highest receiver contracts right now. $30 million though. That's honestly for Tyreek Hill. I'm not gonna say it's a discount, but when you got like a Brandon Ayuk this offseason getting $30 million, I'd rather be paying Tyreek Hill that number than a Brandon Ayuk. So it's not the worst contract out there. It's not the worst contract at all. With the NFL inflation on the salary cap, like $30 million for Tyreek Hill, not bad, but it is something you have to consider when trading for him because it is going to affect your cap numbers. So there's that. But the fact, too, you're not going to be able to trade for him most likely until June 1st because there's something in his contract where, like, if Miami trades it before June 1st, they don't get as much cap savings, and it would almost be like detrimental to them to be trading before June 1st. So they got to trade him after so they can have the cap savings, and the new team's going to be taking on a portion of his contract, and then you got him on the books for 2026 as well. So like that's not optimal either. Like whenever you're heading into May and OTAs, you want to know what your squad is, right? Now I guess June 1st is before training camp, but you want to have all the details taken care of what your roster looks like for the most part before May, before June, before training camp. And like not having Tyreek Hill, that I feel like that could set you back. That might be a little bit too much uncertainty for an organization to handle by just being in this waiting period from whenever, February, March, whenever free agency is, whenever, these talks are going to be happening about receiver trades. You're not going to know if Tyreek Hill's on your roster officially until June 1st. Like, that's a little unsettling because that could affect whether or not you draft a receiver, whether or not you sign a receiver. So like you want to know if Tyreek Hill is going to be on your roster at some point soon, whenever the NFL free agency period, the NFL offseason period starts, because then you have the draft in April. So, I mean, if you're willing to wait it out, maybe you could get a deal. But yeah, it's just that's a weird timeline, the whole June 1st thing. Not only for a team that might be trying to trade for Tyreek Hill, but for the Dolphins too. But that's why they're going to try their hardest to smooth things over and keep Tyreek Hill at least for the next season, I'm assuming. Garrett Wilson. He's in his prime still. Only 25. Has gotten 1,000 yards every year. Was rookie of the year for his rookie season. And all of that in these first three seasons, that's been with all like meh quarterback play outside of Aaron Rodgers this year. And we know this wasn't one of Rodgers' best seasons either. Like that's 1,000 yards every year. He's been productive despite having Zach Wilson and Tim Boyle and who the hell else knows was the Jets quarterback for the last couple of seasons than having Rodgers this year. But even with Rodgers this year, he was Rodgers' main target to begin the season. And then midway through, they trade for Davante Adams, and Garrett Wilson has to become the two. Still, 1,000 yards, though. 1,000 yards rookie year, 1,000 yards sophomore year, 1,000 yards in his third year. And he's in his prime, like 25. He shouldn't be getting any worse. Like this is supposed to be the peak of his prime now going forward. So those were the pros with Garrett Wilson. The cons, you got to pay him soon. If you trade for him, he's up for a contract extension, and I'm sure he's going to be wanting that contract extension given the 1,000 yards per year that he gives you. And that's probably going to be close to like $30 million, I'm guessing, given what some of these other receivers have gotten. Brandon Ayuk, Amon-Ra St. Brown's deal. Now, I think Amon-Ra St. Brown is better than Garrett Wilson, but just think of all these receiver contracts that have happened recently. Devonta Smith, Devonta Smith's number is probably in line with Garrett Wilson. And Devonta Smith, I think, got like 25, 26. So I would say in between that and 30 million is what you'd be looking to pay Garrett Wilson. And then the last con I'm wondering about, is he actually a franchise guy? Is he a bona fide number one? Because these numbers are cool. They're productive, but that's not if you're paying 25 million, 25, 30 million, you want more than 1,000 yards. You're going to be paying Garrett Wilson, not only for what he's done in the past, but you're going to be paying for more. You're going to hope that, since he's only 25 and has all that talent, was a former first round pick, that he's going to be able to give you some more, like get in the 12, 13, 1,400 yard range. So is he a franchise guy, or is he just what he's shown with the Jets, being like a 1B or like a really elite 2? Which wouldn't even be bad either, like, honestly, because sometimes, look at the Eagles situation. I brought up Devonta Smith. Sometimes, like, there's a lot of mouths to feed on an offense. The Eagles got A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith. Best he can be is a 2 with A.J. Brown being there. And if we trade for a Garrett Wilson, we still got a Pickens too. So if Garrett Wilson is a 1B or an elite 2, we could live with that. It wouldn't be the end of the world if we keep Pickens. But that's another question. What are we doing with Pickens? Last guy brought up in this question. Do we go after Tyreek Hill, Garrett Wilson? What about Davante Adams? Well, one of the obvious pros with him is he is, like Tyreek Hill, one of the best receivers in the league. The difference between him and Tyreek is Davante is more of just like that do-it-all type of receiver. Good with the route running, good hands, physical on the outside, can catch jump balls, can catch 50-50 balls. This year he had 14 games played, split between the Raiders and the Jets, still had 1,000 yards and 8 touchdowns. He's on a Hall of Fame pace. If you just go off the numbers, like, the dude is probably worthy of the Hall of Fame. And he's still playing good. That's why I bring up that in 14 games this year, even though he's getting up there in age, 33, still had 1,000 yards, 8 touchdowns. So if he would have played in 17, that's probably 1,300 yards, 10 touchdowns. That's an elite receiver in this game. That's at least a top 10, top 15 receiver. At his best, he's, number 1, number 2 receiver in the league. But those days are probably gone, given that, as I said, he's older, 33 years old. So we'll throw that in with the negatives. Another one is he's just tied to Aaron Rodgers. If Aaron Rodgers comes back, I don't think Davante Adams is up for trade, or he's going to be moving teams. Although, if the Jets bring in a coach like Rex Ryan and he just wants to get rid of Aaron Rodgers and everything to do with Aaron Rodgers, then Davante Adams would be available. Now, I do think whether or not he's available to the Steelers is going to depend on, going back to him being tied to Aaron Rodgers, whether or not Aaron Rodgers retires. Because if Rodgers goes to another team, I would guess Davante Adams goes with Aaron Rodgers to another team. But if Rodgers retires, then I think Davante Adams would be legitimately available. But you see what I mean? There's just a lot of factors that play to whether or not Davante Adams will be even open for a trade or available to another team that doesn't have Aaron Rodgers. And then he's got a bigger contract cap hit. It's kind of crazy over the next 2 years. $38 million in 2025, also $38 million in 2026. So the Jets, if they want to get rid of like the Aaron Rodgers ties, they want to get rid of Davante Adams, just a clean slate, they may just cut him. So he'll be out there in free agency. It might be a thing where the Steelers wouldn't even have to try to trade for him, which is a good thing. You don't have to give up assets for him, because with those cap hits being at $38 million, the dead cap hit is only $8 million and $6 million. So, like, if the Jets just want a fresh start and try to clean up their books a little bit, they'd be saving $30 million by cutting Davante Adams. But then you don't have Davante Adams on your team anymore. There's that. But again, if they want to just get rid of the Aaron Rodgers era altogether, that may be an option. But then if Davante Adams, like I said, if he's a free agent and Aaron Rodgers still wants to play, he's a free agent, I'm guessing he's just going to want to go to wherever Aaron Rodgers is going. I could be wrong. Maybe he goes to the Saints. Maybe he wants to play with his other buddy, Derek Carr. But that seems to be the trend for Davante Adams' career. He wants to like the quarterback that he's playing with. Aaron Rodgers with the Packers goes to a new team with the Raiders. Derek Carr, that was his college teammate at Fresno State, wants to leave the Raiders. His top team, his top target that he wanted to get traded to was the Jets, Aaron Rodgers. So there's that. What would I do if I had to pick between these three? Am I wrong in saying Garrett Wilson? Am I wrong in saying Garrett Wilson would probably be the best fit for the Steelers out of these three? Because of the three, now he's young. He hasn't shown any diva tendencies. Now, Tyreek Hill, Davante Adams, they've been in the business longer. So Yeah, like Tyreek Hill and what he did this last week in Miami. I mean, I think that just comes with him being in the league a long time, getting up there in age, and just not wanting to put up with any BS, not wanting to be on a losing team, a losing program, demanding excellence. I think Davante Adams, we saw the same thing with him in the Raiders. Like with Garrett Wilson, we've heard the rumors that he's going to want out from the Jets. But we haven't heard anything from himself. Like it seems like he seems like a pretty quiet dude and just stays low key. I could be wrong on that, but that's what I'm gauging from the outside. So like of the three, it seems like he has the least diva tendencies. It's not even like I wouldn't even say like Tyreek Hill or Davante Adams are like divas to that degree. Again, I just think they're really good receivers. They know what they want in their NFL careers. They don't want to be wasting time. So they've made it known at multiple points and multiple stages throughout their tenures at various teams. So yeah, I think Garrett Wilson, with him being in his prime, I think the other thing too that's intriguing about him is like if we stick with Fields, like that would be one of my offseason approaches right now. If the season ended today, I would have the Steelers sign Fields, give him a chance to be the guy. Garrett Wilson has that connection to Fields going back to Ohio State. So I like that. And man, you're talking about a dude, only 25, 1,000 yards every year thus far. His 3 years in his career with the Jets, a crappy organization, doesn't know how to run an offense. And the quarterbacks that he's had to dealt with all been subpar outside of Aaron Rodgers. He's still able to put up 1,000 yards. That's not bad, man. That's definitely not bad. The questions, though, in terms of even just trying to trade for a receiver, in terms of trying to bring in one of these, either these top names or maybe the top names in free agency, is like, what are we doing with Pickens? What are we doing with Pickens? Like, are we going to give him this contract extension? Do we have to give Pickens this contract extension? And can we afford to pay? Like, if we give Pickens the contract extension, can we afford to pay two receivers money like that? Because Pickens is probably going to be like in that Garrett Wilson range, between 25 and 30 million, legitimately. Although, with how he ended this season, I think he bumped himself out of 30. I think a fair deal would be 24, 25 million for Pickens. He's only had one season over 1,000 yards. Rookie year was 800. This year, 900. Doesn't have double-digit touchdowns. So it might it might be like that 23, 24 million range. I think that would be fair for GP. And then if you got a Garrett Wilson in here, Davante Adams, Tyreek Hill, then that guy's getting the 30-ish, the 25 plus the 30-ish range right there. Can we afford to do that? I see other teams doing it. I see the Philadelphia Eagles doing it with A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith. We saw the 49ers somehow, some way be able to afford it this offseason by paying Brandon Ayuk when they already had Deebo Samuel on their books. They upped Christian McCaffrey's contract. They still got George Kittle there. They're paying Trent Williams top-tier left tackle money. So, yeah, we can afford it. And then my other question, though, is would we be utilizing one of these receivers in the right fashion? Would we actually become a little bit more pass happy? Would we air it out more? Because it seems like we're taking on a backwards approach as this season came to an end with how much we're passing, how much we're trying to get it to these receivers. I'm not saying it's the end of the world if you're running the ball good, but we haven't been running the ball at an efficient clip either. Arthur Smith, we know his style. He really likes to run the ball. He's always at least top 10 in rushing attempts, whatever team he's calling the plays for. So that's my other question. Would it even be worth it to get one of these big name guys if we don't utilize them properly? Some other dudes that could be available via free agency, and the bonus for the guys that are available free agency is you don't have to give up an asset to get them. T. Higgins. Honestly, I would probably just take T. Higgins out of all these names. If I could just sign him in free agency, give him his deal, and be done with it, let's just get T. Higgins. Chris Godwin, Stephon Diggs, Amari Cooper, Marquise Brown, DeAndre Hopkins, Deontay Johnson, Keenan Allen. Outside of T. Higgins, all these names come with some sort of baggage. Chris Godwin with the injuries. Diggs just got the ACL injury, and we know there was some drama that he brought with him up in Buffalo. Amari Cooper, he's getting up there in age. Marquise Brown, injuries. We got to see him with the Ravens, too. Never really lived up to being the first round pick that they drafted him to be. But he's got the speed, so maybe could be a good compliment. DeAndre Hopkins, up there in age. Deontay Johnson, he's got history here. But we might be able to get him on the cheap because of how this year played out for him. I wouldn't mind getting Deontay Johnson back if it was like less than $10 million. And then Keenan Allen, he's getting too old too, I think. T. Higgins, though, in free agency, that's what I'd be looking at. Yeah, I just don't know. I don't know what our plan is. Maybe that's the other question I have. Because in a vacuum, you tell me we're getting Tyreek Hill, you tell me we're getting Garrett Wilson, Davante Adams. Bro, yeah, I'll take them all day. T. Higgins. But, like, are we signing Russ? That's another question, too. How much are we giving Russ? Because that affects how much we're going to be able to pay a second receiver alongside Pickens. Are we bringing Najee back? What are we doing with left tackle, Dan Moore? Are we moving Broderick Jones over to left and then elevating Fautanu once he gets healthy to right tackle? And those are going to be our franchise guys, the two guys that we drafted in the first round in back-to-back years. So there's a lot of questions here still. We need it. We need help at receiver. There's no doubt about it. It's just what approach do we take? Do we want to trade something to get a Garrett Wilson and then pay him? Same thing with a Davante Adams or Tyreek Hill. At least with Garrett Wilson, man, you're getting him in his prime. He's 25. That's why I think one of the reasons I prefer him over Davante Adams or Tyreek Hill. But it's tough, man. Like Tyreek Hill and Davante Adams are just flat out right better. I'd say they're even better right now. There's a reason the Jets traded for Davante Adams, and obviously he became the number one with the Jets immediately. Part of that is due to his connection with Aaron Rodgers, but still. Right now, he's a better receiver than Garrett Wilson. Tyreek Hill, better receiver than Garrett Wilson. Like, they have more special attributes. They have more wow to their games. The question is with Garrett Wilson, will he get there? Obviously, he's been stymied by being a part of this Jets franchise. I think he can be elite. I really do. I think the fact that he got those 1,000 yards in these 3 seasons consecutively is a testament to who he is. Because, yeah, this Jets program hasn't been favorable to anyone on the offensive side of the ball, particularly in Wilson's first 2 years. So that would be my pick. To your question, if I had to take a receiver of those 3 names to trade for, it'd be Garrett Wilson. If we're going free agency, I'm going T. Higgins. If I had to pick between both free agency and a trade, I'm going T. Higgins. I think he's the best receiver of these bunches of the bunch to get to add to your team, given the age, who he is, play style, all that type of stuff. Because again, Tyreek Hill, Davante Adams, better than T. Higgins career-wise, but I think T. Higgins is at that prime peak of his career and has a little bit more flash, has a little bit more to his game, at least from what I've seen, than a Garrett Wilson. But what are we doing? What's the plan, man? What's the plan? What is the plan? Like, I don't want us to get to a point where we can't afford one of these guys. We can't afford to bring in a big name receiver because we're so cash strapped by giving Russ a big contract and putting money towards things that aren't as necessary or shouldn't be a priority. Omar Khan could figure it out. I'm sure he'd be able to figure it out. It's just, do we draft the guy? Would you rather just draft the guy in the first round? But this draft class for receivers is weak. It kind of is. So it might be smarter for us when you look at the landscape to just go get a T. Higgins or trade for a Garrett Wilson if Garrett Wilson does want out, if he in fact wants out. Because with Garrett, like I said, we haven't heard directly from him, but there are a lot of signs. There's a lot of rumors that are being thrown out there that he wants to move on from the Jets, whether Aaron Rodgers comes back or not. But yeah, that's the answer to your question there. Uno Creations about the receivers and what we do.